Greetings, fellow book lovers, and welcome back to Colin's Corner. Today's video, guys, is going to be the 10 Stephen King books that I am most anticipating reading. Now, I have a lot of King left to read. I know within the books that I've yet to read, I think I've read maybe about 30, a little over 30 so far, so I'm not even halfway there. But I know of the books that I've yet to read, there are some heavy hitters in here and certainly some fan favorites. So these are books that I'm very excited to get to, all 10 of them that are on this list. But before we get into the list, we have to go over the answer for the last Comedy with Colin segment. Now, if you're new here, this is a segment that we do on the channel where I tell you guys a joke at the end of the previous video that I released, and in the next video I give you the answer. So the joke that I asked in the last video was, what washes up on tiny beaches? The answer? Microwaves. Okay, without anything further, guys, let's get on with this list. Now, I'm going to go backwards from 10 to 1, 10 being the book that I am least anticipating, and 1 being the one that I am currently most anticipating. But I do just want to put a disclaimer that these are all books that I am really excited about. There's none of them that I think are going to be bad or anything. I just kind of arbitrarily went with my heart how I felt excitement-wise towards these books. So coming in at number 10, we have Dr. Sleep. Now, if you guys have seen my top 10 Stephen King books video of what I've already read, I posted that about 7 months ago now, you will know why I'm excited to read this one. If you haven't seen that, I will link it in the description of this video so you can go ahead and check that out. Things have changed a little bit since then because I've read more, obviously, so I will try to update that list maybe every couple of years or so. I don't want to outdo it or overdo it, rather. But needless to say, this is supposed to be the sequel to one of my favorite books on that list. I will not say where it falls. I think you guys might know, but for spoiler reasons, I'll just let you go ahead and check that video out. But this is, I think the reason I've been putting this off is because I don't want it to negatively taint my view of some of those characters in that book. Namely, this is supposed to be a sequel following Danny Torrance. Now, I don't know if it's a direct sequel or just kind of a, set in the same world type of thing. I've not seen the movie for Dr. Sleep, but allegedly, we are following a middle-aged Danny Torrance in this one, and the villain or villains in this are supposedly a roaming troupe of semi-immortal beings that travel America's highways in this kind of band of RVs, and they feed off of the shine magic. And the sickest part about them is that they gain their sustenance from children with the shine. So these villains sound pretty instantly hateable, and I've often wondered what ever became of Danny Torrance. Next, for number 9, we've got Holly. This is Stephen King's newest novel. Now, the reason that I didn't read this one on release is because I still have one more piece of Holly published content that I have yet to read, and that would be If It Bleeds. So I'm going to hold off until I finish that, and I've been holding off on watching reviews of Holly because I like to kind of go into these books, especially the newest releases, without knowing too much. But I did watch one randomly. It was my buddy John over from Talking Story. He put out a fantastic review of Holly and included some of his just general thoughts and his, kind of his opinions on how the book was. So I will link that video in the description as well. If you guys have read Holly, or if you're wondering if you should read Holly, I highly recommend checking his video out. Is very eloquent, very well spoken, and he brought up some really good points and gave me kind of a little bit of an idea of what I might be walking into. Now, this newest novel is, of course, following Holly, and Holly is living through the pandemic. So she basically at this point is running Finders Keepers by herself. Now, if you've read Mr. Mercedes or some of the other Holly content, you'll know what I'm referring to, and if not, that's not too much of a spoiler. But so Holly is living through the pandemic. She's running the Finders Keepers agency by herself, and she gets called to help a mother find her missing daughter. So that's kind of the inciting incident, the case that this book will focus on, I believe. But meanwhile, there is a couple. They are a semi-retired couple from academia that appear to the public to be upstanding citizens, but they are harboring a very, very dark secret that nobody knows about. Now, Holly is a character that has grown on me. She's not an all-time favorite character of mine, and normally when fiction books parallel the real world too closely, it can actually it interferes with my suspension of disbelief and kind of kicks me out of the story. Now, King is the author that I have the most experience with this happening with. And when it happens, it's not often that I think it's bad, but when I read fiction, I'm going into it trying to suspend my disbelief and trying to get just fully engrossed in the story, at least mentally. And sometimes when like I said, when it closely parallels the real world, i.e. the pandemic that we all had to, suffer through, it can kind of kick me out. So anyways, I'm going to try to go into this with an open mind. I am definitely excited about it. I'm not trying to go into this saying that I'm going to dislike it right away. It's just an observation that I've made kind of working my way through King's work. So I really hope that I like this. Like I said, I really enjoy Holly as a character, and we're going to see where I end up falling with Holly when I get there. All right, so number 8 and number 7 are going to be a pairing, and secretly, even though they are number 8 and 7 on the list, they are the books that I am most excited to hold up, and let me show you why. Boom. 7 and 8 are going to be Desperation and The Regulators, both published in 1996, but The Regulators was published under the pseudonym Richard Bachman, and Desperation was published as a King novel. Now, let me put these big boys down here. Desperation is a twisted town off of Route 50 in Nevada that is regulated by a sinister man by the name of Colin Trajan, I think is how you pronounce his last name. But Colin is just scratching the surface of the evil goings-on in the town of Desperation, and there seems to be a supernatural aspect to this one that I've heard works well for some, not so well for others, so I'll be interested to see where I fall on that one. Now, apparently Desperation and The Regulators are tied together, which would make sense because of the amazing cover design, but they're not taking place in the same town. So with The Regulators, we're moving east to the town of Wentworth, Ohio, where we meet up with the Carver children. Now, I don't know if The Regulators or Desperation was published first. I just know they were both published in 1996, but there are some crossover characters, namely this Carver family. This is set in suburbia, where everything seems safe and danger seems oh so far away. Except in this scary tale, that isn't true. There is danger sitting right in the van that idles in the neighborhood. And the cover flap for this says that when the van begins to roll, the killing begins. So this one hints at possibly a parallel world where anything is possible. And so these both sound really interesting to me. I don't think that they are... You don't have to read one to understand the other. Now, typically what I hear, since I've been in the Stephen King kind of booktube sphere for about 4 or 5 years now, usually what happens to people is that whichever one of these two they read first, they usually end up liking more. So I've heard good things about both. I heard The Regulators is a little bit wackier, which kind of makes sense because it is a Bachman novel, and the Bachman novels are typically known to be just a little bit more off the wall, where King's just kind of letting loose a little bit more than he normally does, which is already letting loose a lot. So again, I'm really excited for these ones, and these are probably my favorite covers out of all of King's works, the initial first edition covers that I just held up. All right, next up at number 6 on the list, we have The Dark Half. Now, I've always thought that the premise of this one sounded pretty fun to me. So this is the story of Thad Beaumont. He is a writer who has been secretly publishing novels under the pseudonym George Stark for 12 years. Now, Thad created a slightly sinister author biography for George Stark to please the fans of his violent bestsellers. This sounds a little familiar. That would make sense. It reminds me a lot of the Stephen King and Richard Bachman pseudonym that he used for a while. So probably what this is inspired based off of, but who knows. As time passed in the book, Thad becomes a dad. He becomes a happier and a healthier man, and he decides to retire George Stark and resume writing under his birth name of Thad Beaumont. So this takes place in the town of Castle Rock. In the town of Castle Rock, a man named Homer Gamache is murdered, and somehow the prints at the murder scene match Thad Beaumont exactly, but he claims to have nothing to do with the crime. Signs lead towards the realization that George Stark may actually be alive, and he is killing everyone and everything in his path, which is leading him directly back to his creator, Thad Beaumont. Alright guys, we are cracking the top 5 here. Coming in at number 5, The Long Walk. This was originally published as a Richard Bachman story. In this novel, our main character is a 16-year-old boy named Ray Garrity. Ray has, against the better wishes of his mother, of course, a 16-year-old, typical 16-year-old fashion, he enters into the annual competition called The Long Walk. Now, the competition is as follows. There are 100 boys who get to enter, and all the contestants must keep a pace, a steady pace, of 4 miles per hour while they're walking. They are not allowed to stop ever. The winner gets anything he wants for the rest of his life. This takes place in a dystopian America, so my guess is that the tone in this one is going to be fairly bleak. There are a few other rules for the competition. There is no finish line. The winner is the last man standing, and contestants cannot accept outside help of any kind to get them through. If you slow down below the speed limit, you're given a warning. You get warned 3 times, you are out of the game permanently. This novel sounds extremely intense and is certainly on the shorter side of a King novel, well, Bachman novel, but it is clocking in at just over 300 pages, so with the intensity and the tone and the really high stakes that I'm anticipating in this one, I think it will be a book that I end up flying through. Alright, next we are on to number 4, which is the opposite end of the page length spectrum, and of course, we are talking about Needful Things. Look at that beautiful cover. So this, at the time that it was published, was supposed to be a farewell to the stories taking place in Castle Rock, Maine. I think since then that has changed, but at the time, like I said, this was going to be kind of the last visit to Castle Rock. Anyways, in Needful Things, a stranger moves into Castle Rock, where everyone knows everyone in classic Stephen King small town fashion. This stranger is named Leland Gaunt, and he opens up a shop called Needful Things. In this shop, everyone can get what they most want in the world, but they must pay a price to Mr. Gaunt. What are people willing to pay to satisfy their biggest hopes and dreams? I think we can see where this is going. Sheriff Alan Pangborn is truly put to the test as he watches this stranger come in and sow seeds of division in this town full of history and familiarity, and he has to figure out how to put a stop to it. I know Needful Things is loved by many King fans, and this is one of those heavy hitters that I was talking about that I've been, for some reason, just putting off, and I'm not quite sure why I've been putting this one off, probably honestly just because of the length. I haven't been in the mood for like a really chunky King read recently, and so the anticipation for this one is growing. Some people in some Discord communities that I've been in have recently read this one, and it is not supposed to be a completely botched ending, so I'm not sure what the reason is that I've been holding back on reading this one, but I know Leland Gaunt is one of King's more renowned and hateable villains, and I have not spent a whole lot of time in Castle Rock, in general in my King journey so far just hasn't led me that way, so I have a lot of Castle Rock to touch on. And I think I'm going to start with this one because it sounds really, really exciting, and I really love the King small town feel. All right, finally we are entering the top 3. Now coming in at number 3 is Gerald's Game. Now I've seen the Mike Flanagan adaptation for Gerald's Game, and it made me want to read this book even more. So I don't want to say too much about this one. This is one of those ones where the reader benefits best if they know virtually nothing about what happens, but I will give you guys just a little bit of an idea of what you may be walking into. So this one follows a married couple named Jesse and Gerald Burlingame who have the weekend alone to themselves in their Maine summer house. They have an idea that they might try to spice up their love life by doing some role-playing of some kind, and they decide they're going to handcuff Jesse to the bedposts. A sudden anxiety-filled realization hits Jessie while her husband is looming over her, and her reaction leaves her, well, let's just say she's now alone and stuck to the bed. So, as the reader, we are following Jessie's mental turmoil-filled journey for 28 hours as she comes face to face with all the things she has ever feared, but can't do anything about them. If this book is anything like the movie, then it is going to be filled with extreme tension, anxiety, and panic, similar to emotions that Misery was able to elicit from me when I read that. Also, another benefit that we take when we get it as King fans is that this one is also on the shorter side, coming in at about 330 pages. Alrighty guys, at number 2, Revival. Bum bum bum. This is one that I hear from many King fans that have read it, that is actually slept on quite a bit. In a small New England town over half a century ago, a small boy named Jamie Morton is playing in his yard when Charles Jacobs, the new minister in town, strides up to him. Now, Reverend Jacobs develops a deep bond with young Jamie based around a secret obsession. When tragedy strikes the Jacobs family, Reverend curses the religion and God, and he ends up getting banished from the town. We get to follow Jamie through different stages of his life in this, the kid from the beginning that I mentioned. So we get to follow Jamie through many different stages of his life. We get to follow him as a 13-year-old boy, wed to his guitar and just kind of touring the country, playing in bars. We get to follow him in his mid-30s as a heroin addict trying to self-medicate himself due to family loss. Eventually, he meets up with Reverend Jacobs again later in life, and the rekindling of their relationship has profound consequences for both parties. They end up forming a pact, and Jamie learns that the word revival has many meanings. The ending of Revival is supposed to be one of King's better endings, and I think it's really interesting that we are getting to follow Jamie over the course of essentially half a century. King doesn't tend to do, as great as King is with character work, King doesn't tend to do these long-term character studies. I think he's phenomenal at giving us backstory, maybe through flashbacks of the sort like that, and letting us see some really impactful events in characters that make them the way that they are when we're presently reading them. But I can't think of another novel that at least I've read so far where King does almost like a lifelong character study where we're following different phases of the character's life in present day in the book. So I'm really excited to see how King handles this. He has basically almost 100% faith from me in his character work, except for a few exceptionalities over the course of my journey so far. But anyways, this one I've heard basically from everybody that's read it. They don't understand why more people don't talk about Revival in some of their favorite King of all time. Alright guys, and coming in at number 1, my most anticipated King read is The Dead Zone. Now, our main character in The Dead Zone is Johnny Smith. Johnny suffered head trauma when he was 6 years old from an ice skating accident. Now, post-accident, Johnny would get hunches from time to time, accurate hints of what was to come in the future. Now, later, as an adult, this unfortunate man, Johnny, suffers but survives a horrifying auto injury that sent him into a 4.5-year coma. When he comes to, He has the ability to see what was and what will be for both the innocent and the guilty alike. He ends up meeting a horrible man who promises a terrifying fate for all of humanity, and Johnny is responsible for trying to prevent this awful predestination from becoming a reality. The Dead Zone sounds like an absolute blast to me, and this is definitely one that I want to get to sooner rather than later. Well, there is my list of my current top 10 most anticipated Stephen King reads. Now, keep in mind, this isn't taking into consideration all of King's books. I just pulled 10 books from the ones of his that I have on my shelf, but also the ones that I have not yet read. So there may be some of your favorites that did not get mentioned on this list, and that may either be because I've already read it or I just don't own it. So I want to hear what you guys think about my list. I want to hear what some of your favorite King books are. If you have never read Stephen King before, where are you going to start with King? If you are a big King fan, tell me what your next Stephen King read is going to be. Before we go today, we of course have to do this video's comedy with Colin, and today's joke is going to be, what do you call a Christmas tree that does karate? If you think you know the answer, add it to your comment below. Guys, thank you so much for bearing with me and watching this video. If you are new to the channel and you like what you see, please don't forget to hit the like button on this video. And if you want to follow my reading journey through Stephen King and fantasy and other horror authors, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. That is the best way to support me, and it's free to you guys. Again, thanks for stopping by. I hope you guys are all enjoying what you're currently reading, no matter what that is. And you're always welcome in Colin's Corner.